Hey everybody, from deep in the heart of my basement, with a fireplace going, a cat beside me, and minus 22 degrees Celsius outside, I bring you the next episode of the Mental Health Warriors podcast. If you want to support the show, not only would I be eternally grateful, but it would be an amazing contribution to somebody else. So if you listen to this episode, you like what you hear, you think you can help someone, just share it with them. Send them a message, share it on Facebook, whatever. It's really just a couple of clicks and it could literally impact someone's life. And it helps us reach more people. And that's the more people we reach, the more people we can potentially help. And man, that's why I'm doing this. And so your help would be great. And for financial support, if you want to head on over to patreon.com/mentalhealthwarriors, that would also make me eternally grateful. So this conversation with Carlton Mack was absolutely awesome. And here's why, because I had no idea what we were actually going to talk about before we started recording. I knew of him. I knew he'd written a couple of awesome books. I knew he's this huge, big, powerful dude. And I know that he writes a lot of poignant, compelling, meaningful, and deep things, posts on Facebook. And he's just a super articulate guy. And because we all have a tendency to judge people and look at, stereotype them and stuff, he just doesn't physically appear to be a guy that would be like this warrior philosopher. So we had this conversation and it was enlightening. I just loved it. We got to know each other. We talked about some crucible experiences in our lives. We also talked about our own journeys of, personal development, evolution, whatever you want to call it, and how some of those dark moments that may in that time have seemed to be a huge mistake were actually turning points for us to become vastly better human beings. And he's got a great story. He's very, very introspective and articulate and thoughtful, but he's also really open about the fact that, just like me, just like all of us, this journey is a lifetime endeavor and it's not linear. And there are things that are going to work out the way we want. There's things that are not going to work out the way we want. And we need to keep learning, keep reassessing, and just keep moving. And that's really, if that's what we choose to do. And I think another thing he talks about, especially that ties into the emotional and mental health piece, is that we are not our thoughts. And we have great power to be able to do different things with those thoughts, to be able to defeat limiting beliefs, to be able to own the narrative that's been running through our head and change it, and then take different actions as a result of it. It's not easy. Obviously, it's not easy, but fuck, man, is it ever worthwhile? And it's something that, even though most of us often feel powerless to do it, it is something that is totally within our power to do. It's a skill that can be developed, and it's a massively important way we can change our lives and how we interact with the world. So, I hope you enjoy this conversation with my new awesome friend, Carlton Mack. And I'm sure it's not going to be the last, because I felt like, and I said this a number of times in the podcast, but I felt like I could talk to this guy all day long, probably for multiple days, and probably just be scratching the surface. So I hope you enjoy it. I know I did. And we will see you on the other side.
Warriors are not born. Warriors are forged in the crucible of adversity. Warriors without fear are warriors without courage. We are men, destroying stigma and stereotypes. We are a band of brothers, because in brotherhood there is strength. Our weapons are strength, empathy, and honesty. We are mental health warriors. And this is our voice.
Hey, Carlton, welcome to the podcast, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Jason. Glad to be here.
You are... So, I follow you big time on social media, and you are this amazing combination of this freakishly strong badass, but you're also like this incredible poet. You post some of the most insightful, deep and meaningful posts of anybody of the 5,000 people I have as, quote, friends on Facebook. So I'm really looking forward to hearing how you got to where you're at today and where you came from, man. Because I suspect, just based on the research that I've done outside of what I normally see, you've got quite an interesting backstory.
I've had it's been interesting is an apt word. Um, it's been a great journey thus far. I mean, the highs and the lows, and the last several years especially have been really eye opening for me. So I I call it typing out loud. So the things I post on Facebook are usually things that I'm thinking about, I could be going through, or was inspired by something, and I really just look to get people to think, not necessarily to agree with me, but just to think.
Yeah, I love that.
And so,
when
go
you
ahead.
say,
I'm sorry.
yeah, no worries. When you say eye-opening, what does that mean? So the last 2 years have been eye-opening.
Well, the my first book that I published called Redemption, that that was, I would say, the beginning of it. I mean, I've always been kind of I come from a family of educators. So my mother and father, they both are in the school system in the county where my sister and I grew up. My sister, she's a Duke graduate. She has her MBA. She has her law degree. So I was an average student. She's the scholar.
Mm-hmm.
But I just I caught on late, and so in 2012. I got into an altercation. I was out at a bar, got into an altercation, and I ended up punching a guy. He pressed charges, and I spent the next 2 years in and out of court. I lost the first court case, and I ended up appealing, and I ended up winning a jury trial, 6-person jury trial, but the whole thing left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I began journaling about it, and I was like, okay, I can't get everything into this journal. It's not gonna, it's not enough. So what I did was I started to look into other deficiencies within my character, and I can't say I always liked what I uncovered or unveiled, but it helped me tremendously as a person. And once I was on that trail, I was hooked. So now, I want more. So, being vulnerable is something that I look forward to and I embrace, because, now it's like that anytime I get a new moment of awareness or consciousness, it's a gift and a curse. Now I'm no longer ignorant on something. I can see it, and now I can make a conscious choice. I can, I can't act like I don't know. But then sometimes there's a sense of loss when you undergo change, because we want to go back to the place, we used to be, the person we used to be, but that place no longer exists anymore. So we get homesick for a place that no longer exists, but we're now this new person. So I struggle with that, but I still press forward.
That is, I've never heard somebody put it that way, but man, I could not agree with you more. Like and I also think with self-awareness comes this, like this heightened sense of how much work is left to be done, and the fact that it'll never be finished, and I look at myself and I think, I don't know if you ever go through this, but I look at myself and I'm like, I'm doing, like, I coach people, I run these masterminds, I've got all this, quote, self-awareness, yet I still make stupid fucking choices. And I wonder, and then it causes me, like, I spend a lot of time navel gazing whenever I'll give you an example. I over the holidays, I had a few, interactions with family, I would say, that I was totally prepared for. Like, we have the regular, not uncommon family stuff, I would say. And, there's some tension, here and there. And as I'm going over on Christmas, I'm finding myself having this reaction that I was completely unexpected. Like I was getting super stressed out about it. And I'm trying to use all these tools to talk myself through it and all that. And, being very surprised that I actually reacted the way I did. And then spending the next couple of days really trying to understand what caused that. So when you say it's a blessing and a curse, in some ways, I get that. But do you find that as you continually evolve, you get more aware of just, again, how much you have to learn and how far, that the fact that the journey will never be done?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, one thing this lady told me, lady I used to work with, she said that, imagine that you have a circle of knowledge, and the circumference of that circle is everything we don't know. So as our circle of knowledge grows, so does the circumference of everything we don't know. So it keeps us humble because we can never know everything. We can only expand our circles.
Hmm. I've never heard it put that way. That's so true. So maybe let's go back to that night in 2012. Like before maybe setting up that night, like who how would you describe the version of you at that time? Like what kind of life were you leading? What kind of beliefs did you hold? And because I'd be curious to, see how where you've come from to get where you are today.
Yeah, it's a good question. I come from not, not hardcore, like family oriented. And my parents were, I'm old school. I received old school discipline, which, I loved. And I feel sorry for some of the younger generation that they won't ever experience it. So, it's just strong family values. But big on like manners and courtesy and being better than your friends. And that was something my parents always preached. Be better than your friends, be better than your friends. But, when you're 14, 15, 16 years old, I didn't quite get it. So, around the time when I went out that night, this was a time where I had, or before I go there, I was, I guess I was one of the cool kids. I was an average student. I, was an athlete. I got along with everyone. I wasn't like a guy who was getting into fights all the time. But then, I wasn't getting bullied either. I was a cool guy. And I guess this was shifted. I wanted to lift weights. I got bigger. And I was working a lot of security. And the areas I was working in, it wasn't the greatest. And what it did, it kind of, it boosted my ego, my pride in my ego. And I had a hard time transitioning. So you work security and you're this person, you have this power, you're empowered. So now I can enforce rules and people look at you a certain way. You have a voice. If people don't listen to you, you have the power, you can make them leave. But I had a hard time transitioning to when I would go out with my friends or my wife, because people didn't look at me the same. I still was the same big guy. I still had the presence, but I didn't have the authority. And I would what's the word I'm looking for?
Overcompensate?
I cannot think of the word. I'm drawing a blank. Well, basically I set myself up for disappointment with my own expectations of how of how I thought people should view me. But that was a part of it. Even if I wasn't working security, I confused my standards with other people's. So say we're out having a drink at a bar that's going to be crowded and filled with drunk people, and somebody bumps me. Now, I'm like, I was the type of person I had to address that. Why'd you bump me? How come you didn't say excuse me? Because I grew up with those values. Like I grew up with manners, so I thought everyone grew up with manners. So as soon as you didn't say anything, now I am interpreting it as disrespect. And then when I ask you about it and you still don't say anything, now I'm just getting more and more irritated, which then led to anger. So now, because of my interpretation and my assumption that you were raised as me and you had the same values as me, so now my pride is in it, and that's really what it came to a head. And not that I wasn't always going around hitting people, but it was amplified when I was lifting more and I was working security, and so I had more of my chest out in this entitlement of how I should be treated, because most people you get used to drinking. You get used to the taste of triumph, drinking from the glory of triumph. Like everyone's like, "Oh, you're big, I would never mess with you," but it's always the few that unsettle you, who treat you like they don't care if you're big. They're not gonna bow down to you, and that would unsettle me. So it's completely disproportionate, but it would unsettle me, and so that is what happened that night. Everything came to a head.
So when you talk about, I went through this phase of my life too, and I never actually thought about it this way or really reflected on it this way until you mentioned it. But I went through this phase of my life where I fancied myself to be quite the bodybuilder. I was certainly nowhere near your size, but I was still, bigger than the average person. And there would be exactly what you say. Most people were quite impressed by all that, but there would be these other people who it didn't mean anything to them. And that I had the exact same reaction. And I wonder, I feel like I don't know if it was like exposing the own flaws in my own thinking to myself, in a way that I wasn't prepared to deal with, because I felt like when somebody was really confident and they treated me, maybe they appeared even in a way that was, say dominant, or that I interpreted to be dominant over me. And I didn't have the, emotional wherewithal to be able to handle that, because I was just so used to relying on these, puffed up muscles or whatever. And it really I didn't know how to react to that. And I would get quite defensive and, maybe perceived as, not that I ever got in fights or anything, but I just didn't handle that well. And I've never really thought about it. It's just interesting what happens when you're relying on this facade or this appearance of who you want people to think you are, but you don't have the internal personal development to be able to understand the role that, say, being big can play, or, you make it into much more than it really needs to be, I guess.
Absolutely. And I think, you asked, was it us? Was it something within us? And I think it was, because from my experience, and you tell me if you experienced the same thing, I didn't like have friction with other guys who were big. I was training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu back then as well. This was around 2005 to 2010. And so I was lifting and I was training regularly, and I didn't bump heads or have friction with other big guys or other guys who trained. It was like the guys with the beer muscles. So, because when you're bodybuilding and you come across another guy, you guys look at each other. There's a mutual respect. The time and the effort and the blood, sweat, and tears that goes into that. So for me, it wasn't like-minded guys or like, the guys with similar presentations who unsettled me. It was the regular people. And I don't mean regular like I'm better. It was just the beer muscle guys.
Yeah, I used to work at a gym actually, and it's funny you say that because I worked at a gym for a couple of years, and I mean, I would lift there and I would hang out with all the guys that lifted there. And when you hang around with these guys, I mean, obviously they're just normal people, but you also find out that a lot of the people that are driven that way are highly neurotic at the same time, right? So I mean, a lot of people, you go to a place like this and you're always focusing on the things that you're insecure about. I got to work on this, and oh God, I'm not lean enough, and blah, blah, blah. So these, as you say, these quote normal people would come in and I'd give them a tour of the gym, and they were so intimidated to even walk through the front door. And for me, I mean, I was in my late 20s at the time. I couldn't understand why somebody would be intimidated to come into a place but in a place that I was obviously comfortable with because I spent so much time there. But yeah, I totally agree with you, man. And I did some judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, certainly not well. I have zero natural ability, but it was the same thing, just a normal group of guys trying to get better, right? And trying to support each other and get better. And I think that level of camaraderie was something that I actually had a hard time finding outside of those environments at that point in my life.
Yeah, it's I think when you've done a martial art, it humbles you because that there's always you're not the man, and I got great genetics and great athleticism. However, I got great strength. However, it all gets negated by people who have experience, who have more experience, more technical skill. So it keeps you humble. So you even though we went out with that knowledge, we still had to deal with our insecurities.
Very much.
And I felt big one day. I felt small the next day.
Yep.
And was I looking back? Was I small? No, I don't know when I've been small. But I've learned to now be comfortable saying that, admitting that.
Yeah, I think that's I feel the same way. I mean, there's days I feel quite lean, and the next day I can feel like obese, basically. Like it's just, I don't know. It's part of. I'm not super. Like the more I've learned, the more I've just accepted that that's a part of who I am. And instead of trying to constantly change that about myself, now I just try to not take myself so seriously, because I feel like thinking that way and never being satisfied and always striving for more. I mean, there's genetic wiring that makes people that way. I actually had a really interesting conversation with a guy on the podcast. He wrote a book called Driven, and it's about high performing people and why they are wired the way they are, and to never think that. And there's anthropological reasons, there's genetic reasons, there's cultural reasons, but I read the book and I was like, holy moly, this just describes me to a T. And basically the premise was like, this is how you are, accept it and use it as a superpower. Never being satisfied with things can drive you to great achievements. But once I accepted that about myself, and I'm still in the middle of trying to learn how to optimize those characteristics about myself. But I just know that I'm always going to think that way, and I just don't take it so seriously anymore. It kind of gave me permission to just accept myself for who I am and kind of laugh at how weird the things I can think are sometimes.
Well, and to that point, I struggle with my height. Like, I'm 5'10", but the guys I do security with are well over 6 foot, and they're at my highest, my heaviest. I was about 230, and with my height, and I was compact, so a lot of people thought I weighed more, but I was a little guy. And, I'm always like measuring myself. Oh, this guy's 6'3" or he's 6'4", and he weighs this much. And, like pound for pound, I was up there with all of them. But, I had, and a guy, like a big brother, a mentor guy type guy, he told me, man, don't ever let me hear you. You keep bringing up these guys' height and what they weigh. And he was like, you're rare. He was like, you were born with what you were born with, and you've learned how to maximize all of your attributes. And when I stopped like looking or judging myself, based on like physical height or that physical attribute, and my height expanded in other areas. The sky was endless. So it's I don't know what it is. Like I guess as men, I'm looking for more guys to be able to have these, for us to be able to exchange these things about ourselves more, without shame. It's okay.
Yeah, I think part of the issue that prevents that from happening, like people always talk about, the cultural stuff and all that related to what it means to be a man. And obviously that plays a role in it. But I think when we have this natural, or people in general have this natural tendency to want to look at other people and put them on a pedestal. But I think where that comes from is a lack of, feelings of self-worth or self-acceptance or self-love or whatever you want to call it. Because when you don't love yourself as you are in this moment, you naturally want to look around. Like you want to, when your internal worldview is one where you say, I'm not good enough or I don't measure up in these ways. What you do then is you unconsciously bend your outer world to confirm your inner worldview, right? So if I don't think I'm good enough, then naturally what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at people, say like you, for example, I'm going to look at you and go, oh my God, that guy's bigger than me and all that kind of stuff. So when you're coming from a place of lack, I guess, and how you look at and treat and feel about yourself, you want to put people on a pedestal. But when you truly accept yourself for who you are, faults, strengths, ridiculous quirks, history, and all that stuff, and you're just like, man, this is just me right now, and that's it. It's amazing how much that, whether it's raises you up or levels the playing field. But I just look at everybody now and understand that we are all just a bucket of strengths and weaknesses and a million different characteristics that make up who we are. So I think if people could learn to love themselves, they really stop doing that.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think we were always going to have that, but it sounds like we both have learned to, we struggle with that to a much lesser degree.
Mm-hmm.
We can, if we lived closer and we were able to cultivate, a more personal relationship, of course, there's going to be things that I would like to emulate about you and vice versa. But now we understand the importance of sticking to our DNA. So I don't want to mimic you. There's things that I want to emulate because I'm inspired by them, but we still want to remain our person.
That's right. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a great place to be, because everybody's got characteristics and strengths that we would like to develop in ourselves. And when we can do that with, like you say, just maintaining what also makes us the best of who we are, man, that's when some real magic can happen. But so you're at to go back to that night in 2012. So you're at the bar, you end up punching this guy. And I mean, at what point do you realize, like, oh my God, what have I done? Like, I mean, I can't even imagine what it must have been like I'm sure there was points where you must have felt like you've thrown your entire life away.
Well, let's see. There were in the moment, I felt vindicated. Is that the right word?
Justified.
I felt it was preventable.
Mm-hmm.
I was standing at the bar with a guy. It was a crowded bar. I'm standing there. We're going to take a shot, and it's crowded. We're shoulder to shoulder. The guy puts his hand in between our arms or shoulders, and I'm like, we're gonna take a shot, then we'll be out your way. And he said, he was like, all right. So then we took the shot and we got out the way. I was like, here you go, man, no problem. And he said, oh, there's no problem. We're not in the hood. And Jason, I don't know what it is, but I know what it is, but that just set me off. And I mean, we've been talking for almost a half hour, I don't think there's anything about me that screams hood.
Right.
So, I took offense to that. And I was like, that shit was uncalled for. He's like, yeah, what? And then, he stepped and I hit him. He stepped to me and I hit him. And here's how the world works. This is how I knew. Now I know now that I was supposed to get caught. I got thrown out of the bar. I was walking to my car and I got around the corner and an officer stopped me. Now that officer he wasn't there because of me. There was a guy who was trying to get into the bar and he looked young and the bar took his license and his military ID and he called the police on the bar at the same time, and they had showed up at the same time. I had just happened to leave. And that's when they were like, they told, this guy, he's got in a fight, he hit a guy. And that's when the officer came after me. So I was gone. I would have made it to my car, and because this guy called the police on the bar, I ended up getting caught. So that, that's how I know, like, the universe works in special ways.
Yeah, you're right. And so what happens then? Obviously you get arrested, but I mean, and you mentioned you went.
No.
Oh no,
I didn't get arrested. Well, I didn't get arrested. And this is important. Now it's just my reality, and it's not, all these things that, we see going on with police, namely white police with black youth or black young men. That area, I live in, it's not a bad area. Arlington is a very affluent neighborhood, but I'm still a big black guy who punched. I think it was half white and half Afghan. And I still punched this guy. So, they had me come back, and basically I stood on the wall and I didn't say anything unless if they weren't talking to me or asking me questions. I stood there and I shut my mouth. I wasn't aggressive. I wasn't cursing. I wasn't loud. I just stood there, and basically the officer, he told me, you're either going to have to, apologize, or, if he pressed charges, we'll see, we'll go from there. So he pressed charges, and they didn't arrest me. They didn't detain me. They gave me it was like a ticket, like really like a citation to show up for court. But I know that had I been aggressive and been pacing back and forth and cursing, they definitely would have, it's happened on a Saturday night. They definitely would have locked me up. So, that's another conversation, but I think about some of the youth, whatever, of all colors and ages. If I could, that would be a message those moments, even if you're wrong, even if the officer may be wrong, not to gamble in those moments and just let that play out. It could have been worse for me, but, I had my wife with me, and I was like, I didn't want to make it any worse than what it was.
So then you go through 2 trials, but what did you, I mean, I can't imagine how stressful of an experience that must have been, especially, I guess getting found guilty and then having to appeal it. Um, but what did you learn about yourself uh, through by going through that process?
Well, after immediately after, and that, I'm like, yeah, I was feeling good about myself, but for the wrong reasons. Because I hit this guy, knocked him out, um, and I'm telling everybody about it. And it was a guy I worked with, and he was like, you can't live off that satisfaction. And it had it had a literal and a figurative meaning. And by literal, I mean I work in the Pentagon. I have a top secret security clearance, and I had to tell my boss. I got into this bar fight. Now, mind you, you've seen me in my appearance. I don't know if my boss is thinking like, does he do this often? And if this is the only time he got caught, is this an accident? Is this an anomaly, or is this something is this gonna be a pattern? So I have to update him, and when I lost the first case, it was actually it was a misdemeanor, so it's not clearance revoking. But let's say this guy would have fallen back, hit his head, busted his head open. Now, this misdemeanor assault turns into aggravated assault. And then it's a felony. I lose my clearance, which means I lose my job, which means, now my wife and I lose our house. So, when he said that to me, it really, it stuck with me. I hadn't began learning the lesson yet, but it stuck with me. And what I did was I stayed in. I stayed in for like 2 months because I was still pissed off. I still had a chip on my shoulder. Like, I go out, I know how to act. If I do something wrong to somebody, I apologize. I say, I'm sorry. I say, excuse me. There's a reason why we don't just say any old thing to other people, because that's going to incite an argument, which is probably going to lead to a physical altercation. So I'm pissed because I don't like the law. I don't like how and my wife was like, she got tired of me complaining about it and being cooped up, because I stayed in the house. I was like, if I don't go out, I can't get in trouble. So that was like, that was my, that was my philosophy. But when she told me to write about it, then I began to realize, it's been me all along. It's been my thoughts, my mentality, my pride and my ego. So you say, what did I learn? One thing, I learned not to confuse my standards and values with other people's. That expectation that everyone was raised the same got me in trouble time and time again. I learned not to prime myself with negative words. Like I prime myself with, pride and ego, and don't take anybody's shit, and you got to stand up for yourself, and you got to check people. So as soon as these things would happen, I'm already primed to be aggressive. I'm already primed for confrontation. And because I treated it, you would think that these people have predetermined before they went out, when they see this big black bald guy, they're going to bump him, or, and they're not going to say, excuse me, they're going to step on his foot. Almost like I treated them like they had planned it.
Mm-hmm.
And this was all based on my mentality and how I was priming myself, and the words I was priming myself with. Well, I was already, it just involuntarily came out as aggression. That got me in trouble a lot. Caused a lot of pain too.
As far as, internal pain in your own mind or like pain in your relationships?
More so in my mind, because you couldn't tell me it wasn't real. Meanwhile, like you know, I'm sure the people around me, you know, knew like this is a bar, you know, this is a crowded bar. People get drunk, you know, people act foolish. You know, I didn't take that logic into consideration. I was stuck on my own logic, and I wanted everyone to agree with me. And a lot of times I think people just agree because I have such a strong character. I'm stubborn. I'm an Aries, so I'm stubborn.
Me too. When's your birthday?
So,
what day's your birthday?
April 17th.
Oh, mine's the 14th.
Oh yeah. So you know, people are like, oh yeah. They're gonna say whatever they're gonna say, because they're not gonna want me to direct my frustration to them. So it was definitely. I would say, like, okay, here's an example. I hope these assholes aren't out tonight. Now, anyone who knows, if you're going out to drink, there's going to be some assholes. Always. So instead of me saying that, I should have been saying, you know, I hope I am doing enough to be able to handle them, to be able to, you know, handle myself. If I encounter them, what can I do to alleviate any friction soon, you know, to the best of my ability in the best way possible. I wasn't looking at what I could do. I was hoping they weren't out. They didn't do anything. So I was empowering them. So as soon as somebody stepped on my foot, that was it. You know, I'm like, I had no control. Like, damn it, you should have known better.
Mm-hmm. So you said something really, really important there, and I'd love to dig into it a little bit. So what you basically did was you construct, like, the prison, you know, of your thoughts was entirely of your own construction. And you said as you were writing, your wife encouraged you to write, and you went through, and you know, as through that process, you realized it was really you. And man, like I've gone through the same thing. You know, for me, probably the most important thing for me was my rationalizations for my own addiction to alcohol. You know, and it was, if you had told me that my way of thinking was changeable, and that I owned it, I would have thought you were crazy, you know, because I was so wrapped up in my own, like, rationalizing my own behavior. And also, I don't know if you did this, but, or if it's even applicable in this context, but let me know, is that I created all these made up fears about what the alternative would be. So as much as I hated drinking, I would never admit that, though, because I was so busy trying to rationalize my behavior, because I would make up all these fears about what a life being sober looked like, because I had no idea what it looked like. So I'd say shit like, you know, I won't be able to socialize. I don't know how to talk to people. People like the drunk Jay, you know, blah, 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 a million different things. And so that fear would actually create the thing that I actually wanted to stop doing in the first place. Because I would blow these fears up so much that it was actually just easier to keep drinking, because at least it was familiar. So my own irrational, well, I want to say they were irrational. They made sense to me at the time, but my own fears were invented by me, and they kept me doing the thing that I didn't want to do. And then I stopped, and I was like, that was for me the biggest probably moment of self-awareness, or one of my most important ones, I would say, is that none of those fears came true, man. Not one. You know, people liked me better. I was more present. I learned how to socialize. I started having more meaningful conversations. My life started to completely change. And I was like, holy crap. I made all of that up. And I wonder what other limiting beliefs I have. And when I talk to people that are in sort of the thick of it, like whether it's in the mental health warriors or not, or, we all meet people who are they're stuck in these thought patterns that they've always had. And sometimes trying to help them see that you can change them. It's like, I don't know. Before I had gone through it myself, I don't think that I would have believed it was possible. So I guess I think I'm trying to think of what the question was there, but I guess my question is, as you went through this, what was it? And you started writing and you started realizing that it was your thoughts and actions were your own creation. I mean, what was that? What was discovering that like? And was it like bit by bit, or did you have some like thunderclap moment where you're like, oh my God, how did that happen for you?
That was the moment where I was like, that's what I like. That's what writing does for me. It's therapeutic. And as I'm digging in and getting down to my roots of my issues, I'm like, okay, damn, should I peel this layer back? Peel it back. If I have to ask myself, should I peel that layer back? I need to peel it back. And continuously peeling back and peeling back and peeling back. And I'm like, you know what? I didn't like what revealed or found out about myself, but now I'm no longer ignorant. I know exactly what it is. And that is empowering. So, it's like, and I don't know about you. I've always been blessed to have good people around me who can reveal my blind spots.
Yeah, I do. I have plenty now. I never did before though. And I don't know if that was because most people that I happened to come across I don't know, were so wrapped up in their own blind spots, or that I projected. I think part of what it was I projected so much confidence that I think that other people in some ways maybe thought I didn't have any blind spots, or maybe I just seemed so unapproachable that, or that are not interested in, hearing about my own blind spots. I'm not really sure, but it was like this self-fulfilling prophecy of some sort, but I'm not sure, but I know what you mean about writing, because like I kind of think of it as you were talking. It's like purpose-driven navel gazing, because it's like if I'm gonna write a blog post or I'm gonna write a freaking book, there's no point in writing. Like if I don't peel back the onion as far as I'm able to peel it back at this moment in time, the book's gonna be crap, right? So when you spend enough time thinking about a topic with a purpose in mind, instead of just other than like beating yourself up and feeling like you're full of regret and you're an asshole, but like actually a purpose, it's incredible what you can uncover. Because you're right, it's like the onion, there's never stops being layers to the onion. And yeah, it is not always pretty, man.
No, but that's what I want. And the importance of that is so we can prevent someone else from having, the crash moment. So if I can prevent someone from doing what I did, from getting in that altercation and being in and out of court, spending $8,000, if I can prevent that for someone else, then that's a win. But if you spend $8,000 too, then what? Then we lost. Like like we all have our different philosophies, but if our philosophy isn't getting someone getting them to grow and getting them to flourish, then it doesn't matter how clever our words are.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you titled your first book Redemption, so I mean, what is, in your case, what does redemption mean to you?
I feel like I let some people down. Like a lot of people ask me, well, what was it? What was it about this guy? Why you always seem level-headed, which I had tantrums. Like I was that guy. I thought like you had to wear your heart on your sleeve. People respect that. But, people were like, what was it about this guy? You know, why were you not able to walk away? And I guess it was more of a meaning for me, like, because a lot of people up until that point, as well as you could have, guys who went to high school with me, college, they didn't know I liked to write until I put this book out. So they learned a lot of these things about me, when it got released, when it got published, because to your point, what did you said, we talked about peeling back the layers, but you were saying that
It's not always pretty.
no, it was like a lot of people were getting to know the real. It was, I know what it was. It was the confidence that I projected, and you have people, they didn't know, like I had gone through these things or struggle with these thoughts. They didn't know this. They didn't know this stuff. So they're finding it all out for the first time.
Yeah, that was the same thing. That was the same thing for me. And people are like, holy God, man. But I think it, I always say this, and it's so true. And I'm sure you've experienced this all the time with just the way you are, the man you've become. But, one of the greatest gifts I believe that one human being can give to another is to make it safe for them to be themselves. Like it's so simple. Like I think I'm going to write another book at some point. Maybe I don't know about this, maybe this year, but I want to call it "I've Struggled Too. I Will Not Judge You." Like literally the 8 most powerful, like 8 simple words that can totally change the world, And writing a book and putting yourself out there is one really powerful way to do that, because how many people came up to you as a result of you reading that and said, not only, wow, I know so much more about you now, but I feel safe letting you know so much more about me.
Yeah. It's, I got, it was, the feedback was great. And it definitely validated, my reasoning for writing it. It was awesome. I mean, and having published one, it is, especially when it first got published, it was one of those things where, like, it felt like it was, my birthday for a month.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you heard you published a book. Oh, I heard you published a book. And then, getting the feedback from people, and there's, am I embarrassed by some of the things in there? Well, absolutely. But at the same time, like, hey, this is me. I think, with growth, experience, we get more comfortable in our own skin.
Yeah. And, I think too, what I learned from writing the book was, I think the most powerful or one of the most important lessons I learned from writing the book was not having mastery over a subject is no reason not to attempt it. So, when I started writing a book, I had no idea how to write a book, man. Like, in fact, I had started writing one before. It was about vulnerability too, but I didn't know how to write a book. So I got like 50, 60 pages and I'm like, I don't even know what this book is about. I don't know who it's for, and I suck. And then basically I just, shelved it. And then out of the blue, somebody, Hogan Hilling, a guy in the Dad Edge group, but he reached out to me and he's like, oh man, I love everything you're doing. And he helped me introduce me to the publisher. He helped me write the whole book outline. He like offered me moral support while I was writing it. And, but the thing is, as far as the subject matter goes, I knew that I was passionate about it, but I didn't know enough to write a book when I started writing it. I just knew enough to start writing a book. And then when you spend like 4 months or however, I think it took me about 4.5 months. When you spend that amount of time thinking about a topic, you develop, a lot of insights about it. So by the time I finished writing the book, I knew a hell of a lot more about vulnerability. I knew a hell of a lot more about myself, and I knew how to write a book, but if I had let myself, my perception of my own lack of capability in doing this stop me from doing it, or if I had to let that be the drive my actions, I never would have written a book in the first place. And that applies to so much of life. It's just like taking that first step and into the unknown and being confident that, man, it's a journey, and every obstacle you face, you'll learn something. And by the end of it, you'll be better, more educated, more insightful. And it is that simple.
Now, but yeah, like
Yeah,
you said,
now,
like
right?
that,
Yeah.
that, we, a lot of times we think we start something out, we think we have more knowledge and experience and ability, and then we realize we don't, and like you said, then we abort, we stop. Oh, it's not for me, I shouldn't keep going. But it's not, the goal isn't to start in a noble place, it's to end up in one.
I'm writing that down as we speak. That is so true. So as you write the book, and then obviously learn a lot about yourself. You're on your own personal journey. And so, at what point did you decide to write your next one?
I kept writing. Now how it is as a writer. If you I was feeling it, and I just kept going. The bug had bit me. I kept it going.
So what's attributes of man? Tell us about that.
Attributes of man is 18 attributes that I feel constitute a man of value. This is more of a guidebook. So, for instance, integrity, resilience, compassion, pride, your word, humility, accountability, just to name a few. So this one is more of a guidebook, and it still contains personal stories and experiences as well.
So maybe because going back to the whole, putting people on a pedestal idea, and maybe that being a sort of the source of that being our own feelings of inadequacy or whatever. But, so you've written a book. I think it's important for people to hear this because, I talk about, like in my book, I talk about vulnerability, and, people know me as like the vulnerability guy. I still struggle with it. Like, I still struggle when I make some kind of mistake or whatever. It's not like super easy for me to just barf it out. Like, I really got to think through it. So when you look at your 18 attributes, I'm sure people think that you've written a book and you've got these things nailed solid, man. Like every 24 hours a day, you're living these attributes in the way you've described them, at the absolute utmost of how they can be sort of lived in a person's life. But what are some of the things that you struggle with, like, as far as this? I mean, what are you working on right now? What feels important to you?
Oh man, okay, that's a good question. And one thing I learned about writing a book is that I have nowhere near mastered it. It's one thing. A friend of mine, he said to me, imagine if you're in a dark room. It's pitch black, you can't see anything. Somebody flicks the light on, immediately flicks it off. But in that moment, when they flicked it on, it was roaches everywhere. And even though the lights went back off, you can't unsee what you saw. So, writing this book and finding these things out about myself, it's given me a higher awareness. I devote more attention to things like humility, or things like my word, things like compassion. And by devoting more, where attention goes, our conscious awareness follows. So the more attention I can devote to my humility, the more conscious awareness I can have of it. So it's not that I've mastered it, it's just that I've learned to work within the realm of these attributes to a higher degree for the most part. I'm not saying sometimes I fail, I fall flat on my face still, but I've worked to lessen those times,
So when
those moments.
okay, so when you have a moment where you don't say meet your own expectations or fall flat on your face, a typical reaction to that would be, for somebody to beat themselves up, for them to say, oh, I should have never have tried, or who am I to be better, or blah blah blah. This is my lot in life. But when you are say around the topic of or the attribute of humility, when something happens where you make a decision, take an action, and you fall flat on your face, how do you deal with that?
I'll give you an example. With our own humility, we're in the gym. In the gym, I feel like it's my gym. I walk in the gym, it's my gym. When I'm ready to use a certain weight, no one should be on it. Or if you're on it, you should allow me to work in with you. Now, again, I'm telling you my mentality, my values, my standard. There are people in the gym now, and you can vouch for this, who will just sit on a machine or a bench and be on their phone, not doing anything. But they pay the same $40 a month that I pay. If that's why they want to go to the gym, that's their right. Now, and so the days that I get frustrated with them, and I have words with them, that's me, like now I chose to fail. I chose to fall flat on my face because I know these things. I knew 10 years ago that everyone goes to the gym for different reasons. It's not my gym. It's not my equipment. If somebody's on it first, then they're on it. And I can do something else, or I can wait. I always have a choice. But I'll beat myself. And I'll know I won't beat myself up as much anymore, but I also know better. Like, come on, man, they're there for their own reason. They don't understand the reason why I'm there. If I try to explain it to them, it'd be like me speaking Chinese. So, I don't do that as much anymore, but yeah, I'm quick to go up to that person, shake their hand, apologize, and then I let it go. Like, you had a moment, you slipped up, but it's not something that happens as often as it used to.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful example, and that's really what it's all about. There's been interested in the idea of like the elephant mind and the monkey mind, and the elephant being the reptilian sort of the brain, the thing that kind of operates on autopilot. And the point is that when we are so ingrained in behaving a certain way, whether it's through our upbringing, cultural, the beliefs we hold, whatever it happens to be, there's a hell of a lot of inertia behind you that makes you want to keep acting that way. And then when you try to change this elephant brain, this autopilot brain, really, man, it wants to pull back and go back to the way things have always been, and I think people need to understand that, because so many people just they want to. I mean, we're recording this on January 5th, right in the 4 days after New Year's. Everybody's got their New Year's resolution, and I think a lot of people think that wholesale change is possible just by flipping a date on a calendar. And oh my God, man, like, I've been at this, for me, I would say since 2014, I would say, is when I really sort of opened my eyes and started developing myself. And it is not easy, man. Because you want to keep going back to what you've always known. And I think people need to understand it's a journey, and you're going to fall flat on your face, and you pick yourself up and you'll learn from it. And if you can manage to tamp down the judgment, there's lessons to be learned. If you can stop labeling things as good or bad, there's lessons to be learned, because nobody can, I'm sure in the moment when you were going through, okay, let me back up and just say, from where we are all sitting right now, we can't possibly know how things are going to play out in our lives. So I'm sure there was times when you were going through your the trials after punching that guy, where you were like, this is the worst thing in the world, man, and blah, this is all bad and the whole bit. But look what happened as a result of it. Look at what happened. The world is a way better place as a result of that having happened that particular night. Would your personal development and evolution and the contribution you could make to society, I suspect it's far greater now than it would have been if maybe nothing had happened that night. So I think if I don't know where I was going with that, just went on a monologue, but the point is that we just naturally want to return to the way that we are. And if we can just understand that, and it's like nudging the Titanic, man, like bit by bit, that's what will eventually change the course of your life. And it takes a lot of nudges.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying that, about, me being able to contribute to the world. But I know now, if I didn't get caught, I would have gone out the next weekend looking to make an example out of someone else. So my mentality, it was only going to get worse. You talked about the elephant brain, and there's this saying, the elephant and the rider. And the elephant represents our emotions, and the rider represents like logic and rationale. And the rider sits atop the elephant, thinking he has control, but his control is precarious because he's so small compared to the elephant.
Mm-hmm.
And once they have a disagreement about which direction to go in, the elephant's going to win every time. So, when that pull of emotions takes hold of us, now, with our newfound self-awareness, we're better at controlling and disrupting those moods, putting a stop to them so we don't spiral down the wrong path.
Yeah, that's exactly the elephant and the monkey brain. That's the way you describe it is exactly how it works. So typically what happens is the elephant is in control. So, when you got the monkeys or the rider in your example, and, that's not able to control, like the elephant and the rider are all us. They're all you, like they're all within you, right? So they're part of who you are. And so when you can't control the elephant, the rider starts berating the elephant. You stupid elephant, you can't blah, blah, blah. And that's what happens when we judge ourselves for not being able to make change. When if you can take a step back and say, like, what was it about that particular situation that did not allow me to control the elephant? And what can I learn from it? You can probably get much better at handling an elephant, and you can learn to steer it its own direction. But you got to have patience, man,
Yeah. And people don't want to, well, I didn't want to ask myself those hard questions. What was it about? Why did the elephant, what provoked the elephant to, to charge off in that wrong direction? What were the thoughts going through its head? Because what we don't confront can't question us. So when we avoid those hard questions, we can lean on excuses, and it's hard because when you ask yourself these questions, it's gonna elicit frustration and anger and shame, and those aren't places that we want to be. So we avoid those questions. But now we've gotten better at asking ourselves those questions. That internal, having those internal not a quiz, but like those internal tests. And we learn much more about ourselves and the situation, and then we're able, rather than reacting from emotional chaos, we're responding from emotional clarity.
Yep. I love it, man. I can't believe we've been talking for like 70 minutes. I could talk to you all day. Got to do this
Oh
again.
man, this is awesome. I want to call every week.
Yeah, and I think too, what's really interesting is that there will be people that hear this conversation, and this I guarantee you, this is what they're going to say. They're going to go, "Oh my God, these two guys, man, they know what they're talking about. And they sound really smart and all that kind of stuff." And what I always tell people is, it's only because we talk about this stuff all the time, right? Like that's the reason we sound like we know what we're talking about. And like for people that know, like that elephant monkey mind thing, this conversation was the one we're having right now is the very first time I've ever been able to explain that to somebody in a way that made sense, because I only learned about the concept like about 2 months ago. And I've always been like, yeah, and there's this thing like the monkey mind. And then I'm like, but I don't really even know what the hell I'm talking about. So I'm going to stop talking about it right now. So it's just practice. And it's like you listening to your ideas. I've taken away so much from this conversation, and it's like, it's changed me forever. I'll never be the same person again as a result of having this conversation with you. And I will take what you've taught me. Like one of the takeaways, I was actually typing it when you were talking, which is, the idea about not having to begin in an old place, but ending in one. Like that's so freaking powerful, and it's in these conversations, these real authentic conversations, that you learn about yourself and you learn about the world and you learn about other people and you get better at articulating your own ideas or forming your own ideas and articulating them, and that's why these conversations are so damn important, man.
Oh man, I couldn't agree more. One thing you talked about was, like you said, from 2014, like your journey is taken off. And that what I understood and I want to convey to other people is that, when we're in that room and that light switch comes on and like we saw those roaches and the light switch went off, like we can't unsee what we saw. And that's the same thing in life. Like when we have these realizations, now we're awake. So these things that we're like encountering and still going through, these things were always there. We were asleep in the previous years. Now we see them all because we're awake, because of our awareness. And in terms of how we sound as if we know it all, like, no, we teach best what we need to learn most. So I could tell somebody how not to be angry, why you shouldn't become angry, the ramifications of anger. I could teach somebody that all day.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I love this conversation. So let me ask you, as we wrap this conversation up, if there's any key, we've covered a ton of ground here, but are there any key takeaways that you want people to leave this conversation with?
Let's see. I'm gonna quote Brene Brown. Are you familiar with her?
Oh, I sure am.
She has great material, great stuff. She said, she said, you can't get to courage without walking through vulnerability.
Boom. I totally agree, man. It's vulnerability to me is the source of great courage, and I think it's because for me, the way I've been thinking about it, maybe you have a different point of view, actually. I said we're going to end this, but I'll just ask this one more topic because it's really interesting to me. But I always kind of think of vulnerability as, I always describe it as, I kind of made up my own definition, but I always describe it as like having the courage to look yourself in the mirror and be honest and without judgment, or pretty much without judgment, about who you see staring back at you, right? Because that was my big thing. I just couldn't admit the man I was at that particular point in my life, and like as objectively as possible, because I was just spinning all these stories about it. But I kind of feel like vulnerability, one of the ways it gives you courage is that it allows me to admit that I am a perfectly flawed human being in this moment, and I'm where I need to be, and I can love myself despite all of my, quote, shortcomings. And when I love myself and accept that no matter what happens, I will continue to love myself, it gives you a really enhanced sense of courage to be able to step outside your comfort zone, because you always know that you have this place of acceptance to fall back on if things don't turn out the way you want, and that's how I kind of describe the connection between vulnerability and courage. But I don't know, do you have a different perspective on it, or?
No, for me, it's like imagining doing things is way worse than doing them. So each time we've been fearful of being vulnerable, what we thought would happen didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
No one, the people who really matter in our lives, they didn't change. It didn't change their thoughts about us, their opinions, or their love. But if anything, it strengthened it, it enhanced it. I guess everyone's going to have their own personal meaning of what vulnerability is. But I just hope that definition encompasses the positive aspects of the word.
Yeah, for sure, man. So listen, I want to ask you one last question, and that's, let's say the best version of Carlton Mack today is in that bar back in 2012. What happens?
I would still feel the shudder. I would still feel the the feelings of, what is this guy doing? I wouldn't act this way, but now I have that, because of the new awareness, I can go over in my mind, okay, we're different. His standard's different than my standard. I already have redemption. I can't write a redemption too. And I have a 3-year-old son whom I didn't have in 2012. So, in terms of being awake and aware, I am in a whole new place with a whole lot more to lose, and an understanding of what will happen if I make this bad decision. Because now it's not a mistake. You could say it was a mistake before, but now I have so much more information and knowledge and awareness that it would be a conscious choice for me to do that. And the value of something is not what we attain with it, but what we pay for it, what it cost us. So now that's how I weigh things. I could do this, but what is it going to cost me? And it's going to cost me way more now than it cost me 5 years ago. So I have the ability to analyze more.
I love it, man. Yeah, it's like turning off the autopilot,
Exactly.
Well, man, this was absolutely awesome. I knew I was going to enjoy this, but I actually enjoyed this even more than I thought I was going to. And like I said a few minutes ago, I feel like we've only just scratched the very surface here. So I'm thinking we got to do this again sometime, because I would love to talk to you more, man.
I would love it. Whenever I know you have a waiting list of guys. So whenever you can squeeze me in again, I would love it. And thank you for bestowing all of your knowledge and wisdom on me as well.
Hey, it's what we do, man, isn't it? No, it was great. It was just great to talk to you. So listen, I'm going to link to obviously link to your books in the show notes page. But is there any other way if people want to find out more about what you're doing for them to connect with you?
I'm working on that. I need to start a blog, and you got me thinking. I need to start a podcast. But for now, I do have my social media presence through Facebook and Instagram.
Cool, man. Yeah, well, we'll link to that too. And listen, you ever want to? I mean, you setting up a blog is straightforward, but if you ever want the details on podcasting, because it's been an interesting journey, I can walk you through everything I've learned, because it is, I'm telling you, man, it is just such an amazing platform to have incredible conversations with incredible people, and then learn, but then have other people learn along with you. As they listen to the podcast, like it's just a totally virtuous activity. And I've probably done, I mean, I've released about 45 episodes, I think 39 full ones and maybe 5 or 6 like little kind of mini ones. And then I've got probably about 12 more recorded or something. But the amount I've learned as a result of doing this is mind-boggling. And I've had the opportunity to talk to people that I never would have had the chance to talk to otherwise if I didn't have like it's not a huge platform, but if I didn't have a platform, right? Because people love being on podcasts because it's valuable to them, it's valuable to me, and it's awesome. So if you want to get that started, I think you'd have so much to offer, man. And I would love to be able to help you with it.
Okay, I'll definitely get with you offline about that.
Yeah, for sure, brother. Well, listen, have a great weekend, man. And thanks a lot. This was great.
Jason, thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate it. And I enjoyed myself.
Okay, man.
I look forward to the next one. Take care.
For sure. Okay, bye.
Okay, brother.
Carlton, my brother, that was outstanding. You left me feeling really pumped up and on a high note for a couple hours after that conversation. So thank you, my friend. And I really look forward to having more of these conversations with you and following your work and supporting you in any way I can. It's you're doing important things, and it's awesome to see your journey unfold. And I also know that there's no way in hell I'm ever going to deadlift 560 pounds like you do, but I will continue to crush my kettlebells and use you as inspiration. So I'll end this podcast like I end every podcast, and that's to say that maybe I'll sing it today. If you are struggling, I've struggled too. And if you ever want to fucking talk to me, I will not judge you. I think I'm probably never, ever going to do that again, actually. Well, I'll never say never. But yeah, listen, we've all struggled. It's one of the commonalities that binds us together. So let's stop pretending that we don't. Let's start using our experiences. Let's own them. Let's share them. And let's make a powerful, powerful, life-changing contribution to somebody else's life and your own. Because when you are the type of person that makes it safe for somebody else to be themselves, you are unleashing an incredible superpower that you may not know that you had. And just watch what happens when you start being that person. So hope you enjoyed this episode. And we will see you next time on the Mental Health Warriors podcast.